I gave them everything they wanted. My lawyer said I was insane. My best friend begged me to reconsider. Even the bank manager looked at me like I'd lost my mind when I signed the paperwork. But when their attorney read one sentence in the final contract, his face went white. Nathan dropped his pen. Violet actually gasped. That's when I knew Douglas had been right all along. "Trust the process," he'd whispered in that hospital bed 3 weeks before he died. His hand was cold in mine, his voice barely audible over the machines keeping him alive. "Just trust me, Rose." I hadn't understood then. I didn't understand at the funeral, or during the week after when the casseroles piled up on my kitchen counter and I wandered through our empty house like a ghost myself. I didn't understand when Nathan and Violet showed up at my door with their lawyer and their sympathetic smiles and their carefully rehearsed speeches about Dad's wishes and what's best for everyone. But I understand now. And God help me, I wish I didn't. The spring sunlight coming through Douglas's office window felt wrong. Too bright, too cheerful, too indifferent to the fact that the man who'd sat at this desk for 20 years would never sit here again. I stood in the doorway, unable to make myself cross the threshold. 3 weeks since the funeral, and I still couldn't bring myself to touch anything. His reading glasses sat on top of a stack of technical journals. His coffee mug, the one that said "World's Okayest Engineer," still had a ring of dried coffee at the bottom. His leather chair was pushed back at an angle, like he'd just stood up and would be back any minute. "Trust the process, Rose." I pressed my palm against the door frame, Douglas's voice echoing in my head. He'd said it that last night in the hospital, his eyes fever bright, his grip on my hand surprisingly strong. At the time, I thought it was the morphine talking. Douglas always had a plan, always thought 3 steps ahead. Even dying, apparently, he was strategizing. But a plan for what? The doorbell rang, shattering the stillness. I glanced at the clock. 2:47 p.m. Too early for more sympathy casseroles. Too late for the mailman. Through the front window, I could see Nathan's black Mercedes in the driveway, Violet's white Lexus parked behind it. My stepchildren. Though that word had never quite fit. They were adults when Douglas and I married 24 years ago. Nathan 20, Violet 16, both still raw from their mother's death 2 years earlier. I'd tried to be something. Not a replacement mother. A friend, maybe. An ally. I'm not sure I ever succeeded. I opened the door to find them standing together on the porch. Nathan in his sharp gray suit, every inch the successful San Francisco lawyer. Violet in a cream-colored dress that probably cost more than my monthly grocery budget. Her hair styled in soft waves. Her makeup perfect. Behind them stood a man I recognized, Thomas Reed, the family attorney who'd handled Douglas's affairs for 15 years. Rosemary. Nathan's voice was gentle, his dark eyes, so like Douglas's, filled with what looked like genuine concern. "I hope we're not intruding. We tried calling." "My phone's been off," I said. It was true. I couldn't handle one more person telling me they were sorry for my loss, like grief was a misplaced set of car keys. "Of course." Violet stepped forward, her perfume, something expensive and floral, wafting over me. We need to talk to you about some important matters. Family business." Family business. The phrase sent a chill down my spine, though I couldn't say why. I stepped aside to let them in. They settled in the living room with the practiced ease of people used to occupying space. Nathan on the leather sofa, Violet in the wingback chair, Thomas Reed in Douglas's favorite armchair by the fireplace. I perched on the edge of the love seat, feeling suddenly like a guest in my own home. "Rosemary," Thomas began, pulling a manila folder from his briefcase. His usual warmth was missing, replaced by something more formal, professional. "I know this is difficult timing, but there are estate matters we need to discuss." "The will," Nathan added quickly. "Dad's will. We thought it best to go over everything together, as a family." I nodded, my throat tight. We'd had a will. Douglas had insisted on it when we married. "If anything happens to me," he'd said, "I want you taken care of." We'd updated it 5 years ago after he sold his share in Palmer & Associates. I remembered signing the papers, remembered Douglas squeezing my hand afterward. All set, Rose. You'll never have to worry. But looking at their faces now, Nathan's carefully blank expression, Violet's overly sympathetic smile, Thomas's uncomfortable shifting, something felt off. Your husband, Thomas said carefully, updated his will 6 months ago. 6 months. Right when he'd started having those mysterious business meetings he never quite explained, when he'd begun spending long hours in his office with the door closed, when I'd chalked up to early retirement restlessness. He didn't mention it, I said softly. No, Thomas agreed. He was quite specific that he wanted to handle the estate planning privately. I advised him to discuss it with you, but he glanced at Nathan, who gave an almost imperceptible nod. Douglas felt it was better this way. Better for whom? Thomas opened the folder and slid a document across the coffee table. The primary residence here in Sacramento, currently valued at approximately $920,000, is bequeathed jointly to Nathan and Violet Palmer. The words didn't register at first. I stared at the legal language swimming before my eyes. Our house. The house where Douglas and I had lived for 24 years. The house where I'd planted roses in the front garden and painted the kitchen 3 different colors before finding the right shade of cream. The house where we'd hosted Thanksgiving dinners and Christmas mornings and quiet Sunday afternoons reading the paper together. Gone. The vacation property at Lake Tahoe, Thomas continued, his voice flat, mechanical, valued at $780,000, also to Nathan and Violet Palmer jointly. The villa, where we'd spent our honeymoon, where Douglas had taught me to kayak, laughing when I tipped us both into the water, where we'd celebrated our 10th anniversary, our 20th, planning for our 25th. Gone. The business assets from Palmer and Associates, Thomas said, including remaining investments and holdings, approximately $450,000, to be distributed between Nathan and Violet Palmer. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't. The room was tilting, the sunlight too bright, everything too sharp and too blurry at the same time. The life insurance policy, Thomas said quietly, in the amount of $250,000, is designated to you, Rosemary Palmer. $250,000. It sounded like a lot until you did the math, until you realized that Nathan and Violet were inheriting over $2 million in assets while I got... There is, Thomas cleared his throat, one additional matter. Your husband incurred significant medical expenses in his final months. Experimental treatments, private nursing care, medications not covered by insurance. The total outstanding balance is approximately $195,000. My vision tunneled. But the insurance covers most of it, Nathan interjected smoothly. You'd be left with about $55,000 after settling the debts. That should be more than enough to get you started somewhere new. Somewhere new. $55,000 at 64 years old with no career and no home. This can't be right, I heard myself say. Douglas promised he said I'd be taken care of. And you are, Violet said, her voice honey-sweet. The life insurance is quite generous, Mother. Dad wanted to make sure you had something. Mother. She only called me that when she wanted something. We've also arranged, Nathan continued, for you to have 30 days to make moving arrangements. We think that's more than fair. Fair. There was that word again. Thomas was looking at me with something that might have been pity. Mrs. Palmer, I have to admit this distribution seems unusual given the circumstances. If you'd like time to consult with your own attorney, that won't be necessary. Nathan's voice was sharp. This is what Dad wanted. We're just honoring his wishes. But I was watching Thomas's face, and I saw something there. Doubt. Confusion. He'd known Douglas for 15 years, and whatever this was, it didn't sit right with him either. I think, I said slowly, my voice sounding strange to my own ears. I need some time to process this. Of course. Nathan stood, buttoning his suit jacket. This is a lot to take in. Why don't we give you a few days to think things over? We can meet again next week to discuss the timeline for transferring the properties. They filed out, Violet squeezing my shoulder on her way past, Thomas giving me a long, searching look that I couldn't quite interpret. I sat alone in the silent living room, the will still on the coffee table, the late afternoon sun casting long shadows across the floor. 24 years of marriage, $55,000, 30 days to vacate. Something was wrong. I could feel it in my bones, in the hollow space where my heart used to be. Douglas wouldn't do this, wouldn't leave me with nothing, wouldn't. My fingers found their way to my purse almost unconsciously, pulling out Douglas's wallet, the one the hospital had returned with his watch and wedding ring and the clothes he'd died in. I'd kept it with me these past 3 weeks, unable to put it away, drawing some small comfort from the worn leather, the familiar smell of his cologne still faintly clinging to it. I opened it with trembling hands. His driver's license photo, taken 5 years ago, before the illness stole the color from his face. A faded insurance card, expired grocery store coupons he'd never remembered to use. Our wedding photo, creased and soft from years of being carried close to his heart. And something else, something I'd never noticed before, tucked into a hidden pocket behind the credit card slots, so thin I'd missed it in my earlier grief-numbed searches, a small brass key. It was old, worn smooth with handling, with a number stamped on the head, FB447. I turned it over in my palm, my pulse quickening. I knew every key in our house, every lock, every drawer. This didn't belong to anything I recognized, but Douglas had kept it in his most private space, hidden away like a secret, like a message. Trust the process, Rose. I closed my fist around the key, feeling its edges bite into my palm. Maybe I didn't have to understand yet. Maybe I just had to trust. I spent that entire night searching. Douglas's office first, methodically checking every drawer, every file cabinet, every box stacked in the closet. Nothing. The key was too small for any of the locks I found. Our bedroom next. I went through his nightstand, his dresser, the old trunk at the foot of our bed where he kept his college textbooks and his father's war medals. I checked the backs of picture frames, the undersides of furniture, places I'd seen in movies where people hid things. Nothing. By 3 a.m., I was sitting on our bedroom floor surrounded by the detritus of a shared life. Photo albums, old tax returns, birthday cards I'd saved, love letters from our courtship. My eyes burned with exhaustion and unshed tears. The key sat in front of me, gleaming dully in the lamplight. FB447. First type. Something? Bank? That made sense. Douglas was meticulous about finances, always had been. But we'd consolidated everything at Sacramento Credit Union 5 years ago. We didn't have accounts anywhere else. Did we? I picked up my phone, the screen brightness making me wince. A Google search for FB447 key brought up thousands of results, none helpful. I tried bank key FB, safety deposit box, First Bank Sacramento, First Bank. My fingers froze on the screen. First National Bank on J Street. The old limestone building downtown that Douglas passed every day on his way to the office. I'd met him there once for lunch years ago, when Palmer and Associates was still in the building next door. FB, First Bank. My heart hammered against my ribs. Could it be that simple? And I couldn't sleep after that. I watched the sky lighten from black to gray to the pale gold of early morning, the key clutched in my hand like a talisman. At 8:45 a.m., I was showered, dressed, and sitting in my car outside First National Bank, waiting for them to open. My hand shook as I gripped the steering wheel. What was I hoping to find? Evidence that Douglas hadn't betrayed me? Proof that Nathan and Violet were lying? Or just an explanation? Some scrap of understanding to make sense of the wreckage of my life? The doors unlocked at 9 o'clock. I was the first person through them. The bank manager, a woman in her 50s with kind eyes and an efficient manner, looked up from her desk as I approached. Her nameplate read Patricia Chen. "I need to access a safety deposit box," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. "Number 447. Something flickered across her face. Recognition, maybe sympathy. "Mrs. Palmer," she said softly. I was so sorry to hear about Douglas. He was a wonderful man. She knew me. which meant she'd known about the box. "Can you help me?" I asked. Patricia stood, pulling a set of keys from her desk drawer. "Of course. Follow me, please." We descended marble steps into the vault, our footsteps echoing in the hushed space. Patricia led me to a wall of small brass doors, each with a number. She stopped at 47. "Your husband opened this box 7 months ago," she said quietly as she inserted her master key. "He came in every month after that, always alone. Always very secretive?" I supplied. "Intentional," Patricia corrected gently, "like a man with a purpose." She turned her key, then stepped back. "I'll give you privacy. Take all the time you need." I inserted Douglas's key with trembling fingers. The lock clicked open. The box was heavier than I expected when I lifted it from its slot. I carried it to the small private viewing room Patricia indicated, my pulse thundering in my ears. The room was barely bigger than a closet. A table, a chair, harsh fluorescent lighting. I set the box down and stared at it for a long moment before lifting the lid. Papers. Dozens of them, neatly organized in folders and envelopes. My fingers hovered over the contents, not sure where to start. Then I saw it. An envelope on top of everything else. My name written in Douglas's familiar handwriting. "For Rosemary, read this last," which meant I needed to see everything else first. I set the letter aside and reached for the first folder. It was labeled Evidence, Nathan Palmer. Inside were photographs. Nathan entering and leaving a building with neon signs advertising poker and blackjack. The timestamps showed multiple visits over the past year, sometimes staying for days at a time. Bank statements showing cash withdrawals of thousands of dollars. Credit card bills with charges to casinos in Reno, Las Vegas, San Francisco. Collection notices from creditors. The total at the bottom of a handwritten summary. $180,000 in gambling debts. My breath caught. Nathan. Successful lawyer Nathan with his expensive suits and his Mercedes and his pristine reputation. But there was more. Therapy intake forms from a gambling addiction counselor. Medical records showing a family history of compulsive gambling. His biological mother, Douglas's first wife, who died when Nathan was 12. I remember Douglas telling me about her, his voice heavy with old grief. "She couldn't stop," he'd said. "I tried everything. Rehab, therapy, interventions. She promised she'd quit. And then one day she didn't come home. Drove to Reno, lost everything we had left, and..." He'd never finished that sentence. Nathan had been there when they found her. 12 years old, sitting in the hotel room next to his mother's body, pills scattered across the nightstand. He was becoming her. I set down the folder with shaking hands and reached for the next one. Evidence, Violet Palmer. More photographs, more bank statements. But these told a different story. Violet's consulting business, the one Marcus ran, the one they'd used to maintain their lavish lifestyle, was a shell. Fake investment schemes. Money from elderly clients funneled into accounts that went nowhere. Promises of high returns that never materialized. Total losses. $220,000 of other people's money. But as I read deeper, the story became more complicated. Email exchanges between Violet and Marcus showed a pattern. Him pushing her to recruit more clients. Her expressing doubt. Him reassuring, cajoling, and finally, in the most recent emails, threatening. "If you don't close the Henderson deal, I swear to God, Violet, you think your family will believe you didn't know? You're in this as deep as I am. Don't make me do something we'll both regret." At the bottom of the folder, photographs of Violet. Bruises on her arms. A black eye poorly covered with makeup. A cracked phone screen from where she'd dropped it, except the private investigator's note suggested otherwise. My hands clenched into fists. Marcus. I'd never liked him, never trusted his smooth charm and his too-perfect smile, but I'd never imagined. Violet wasn't a villain. She was a victim, and Nathan wasn't a schemer. He was sick. I sat back in the chair, my mind reeling. This wasn't the story I'd expected. They weren't just greedy children trying to steal their inheritance. They were broken people making desperate choices. But that still didn't explain why Douglas had left me with almost nothing. I reached for the next item in the box, a USB drive labeled recordings. I didn't have a laptop with me, but Patricia Chen let me use one of the bank's computers in a private office. My hands shook as I inserted the USB drive. The screen filled with a list of audio files, each labeled with a date. The oldest was from 8 months ago. The most recent was from 2 months before Douglas died. I clicked on the first one. Static, then voices. Nathan's voice, tense and urgent. And Violet's, softer, hesitant. Dad's getting worse. Dr. Foster thinks he's got 6 months, maybe less. Nathan, I don't know if I can do this. We don't have a choice, Vi. Marcus is breathing down your neck, and I'm in so deep with the casinos that... A pause, a bitter laugh. We need this. We need Dad's estate. But Rosemary's not blood. She gets what the law requires, nothing more. Dad would understand. He'd want us taken care of first. Would he? Because I'm not so sure anymore. He's been acting strange lately, secretive. What if he knows? He doesn't know. He's dying, Vi. He's not thinking clearly. And even if he suspects something, what's he going to do? He loves us. He'll forgive us. The confidence in Nathan's voice made my stomach turn. The assumption that Douglas's love was something they could exploit, manipulate, use. I clicked on the next file, dated 6 months ago. I talked to Thomas Reed today. Nathan's voice again. Mentioned how worried we are about Dad's mental state. Planted some seeds about his decision-making being compromised. Nathan, that's necessary. We need documentation that he wasn't competent when he made any last-minute changes to the will. Just in case. In case of what? In case he tries to cut us out, or leave everything to her. A long silence, then Violet's voice, barely a whisper. This feels wrong. What feels wrong is letting Marcus threaten you. What feels wrong is those casino guys who keep calling me at 3 a.m. We're his children, Violet. We deserve this inheritance. We've earned it. Have we? We barely visited him the last 5 years. We didn't call on his birthday. When was the last time you actually had a conversation with Dad that wasn't about money? That's not fair. Isn't it? Be honest, Nathan. Would we even be here if we weren't desperate? Another long pause. When Nathan spoke again, his voice was harder. Does it matter? Desperate or not, we're entitled to what's ours. Now, are you in or not? Because if you back out now, Marcus is going to find out about those missing client funds, and I don't think you'll like what happens next. Are you threatening me? I'm reminding you what's at stake, for both of us. The recording ended. I sat frozen, staring at the blank screen. Nathan had been blackmailing his own sister, using her fear of Marcus, her desperation, to force her compliance. And Violet, trapped, scared, knowing it was wrong but too terrified to refuse. I clicked through more files. Most were similar. Nathan planning, strategizing, manipulating. Violet expressing doubts that Nathan systematically crushed. But then I reached a recording labeled Palmer Nathan Final. Douglas's voice filled the room, and I nearly broke. I know what you're planning, son. Dad, I don't know what you mean. The forged loan documents, the accounts you've been siphoning from, the little stories you've been telling Thomas Reed about my mental competency. A long silence. Then Nathan, his voice stripped of its usual confidence. How long have you known? Long enough. I hired an investigator 6 months ago. I've been documenting everything. Then why didn't you stop me? Why didn't you say something? Because I wanted to give you a chance to stop yourself. Douglas's voice was heavy with grief. I kept hoping you'd wake up one morning and realize what you were becoming. That you'd see you were following your mother's path straight off the cliff. Don't, Nathan's voice broke. Don't bring her into this. You brought her into it the moment you walked into that first casino. I tried to help you, Nathan, offered to pay for therapy, for rehab. You refused. Because I don't have a problem. I can stop whenever I want, That's what she said, word for word, right before she drove to Reno that last time. Silence, then the sound of someone crying. raw, broken sobs. "I'm sick, Dad. I need help." "Then accept help, real help, not stolen money that'll just enable you to dig yourself deeper." "It's too late for that. I'm in too deep. The people I owe, they're not the kind who accept payment plans." "Then we call the police. We deal with it legally." "And what? Go to jail? Lose my license? Destroy my life?" "Better than losing your soul. Better than betraying family. Better than becoming someone I don't recognize. You don't understand. You've never understood. You had everything. Successful business, perfect wife, no demons. You don't know what it's like to be broken from the start." "Nathan, just let me have the inheritance, Dad. Please. I'll get help after. I'll go to rehab. I'll fix things with the casinos. I'll start over. I promise." "You promised that before. 6 times. I counted. This time will be different." "Why? Because the stakes are higher? Because you're stealing from me instead of from strangers?" "That's supposed to make it better?" The recording went quiet for so long I thought it had ended. Then Douglas spoke again, his voice thick with emotion. "I love you, son. God help me, I still love you. But I can't save you. You have to save yourself. And I won't let you destroy Rosemary in the process." "So what are you going to do? Cut me out completely?" "I'm going to give you exactly what you deserve. And I'm going to pray that it's enough to wake you up before it's too late." "What does that mean?" "You'll find out. After I'm gone." The file ended. I sat in the silent office, tears streaming down my face, my heart breaking for Douglas, for the impossible position he'd been in, torn between love for his son and the need to protect me. For Nathan, sick and desperate and following his mother into the same darkness. For Violet, trapped in an abusive marriage and coerced into crimes she never wanted to commit. This wasn't a simple story of greedy children and a wronged widow. This was a tragedy playing out across generations. But there was still one file left, dated just 2 weeks before Douglas died. Labeled simply, Rose. I clicked on it with trembling hands. Douglas's voice, weaker now, rough with illness, but still unmistakably him. "My darling Rose, if you're listening to this, you found the box. Good. That means you didn't give up. That means you trusted me, even when nothing made sense. I'm sorry I couldn't tell you all of this while I was alive. I wanted to. God knows I wanted to. But I needed them to act first. Needed to catch them in the trap. Needed irrefutable proof of what they were planning. You're probably angry with me right now. Hurt. Confused. You're thinking I betrayed you, left you with nothing. And I'm sorry for that pain, Rose. Sorrier than you'll ever know. But here's the truth. Everything you saw in that will Thomas showed you is a lie. Well, not a lie exactly. It's a real document, properly executed and legally binding. But it's not the whole story. There's another will, Rose, the real one. Created 5 weeks before I died, held by an attorney named Sarah Mitchell. Her card is in this box. Call her. That will leave everything to you. The house, the villa, the business assets, all of it. With one provision. You get to decide what, if anything, Nathan and Violet deserve to inherit. I'm leaving that choice to you because you're wiser than I ever was. Because you have the compassion I've lost and the clarity I lack. Because after 24 years of marriage, I trust your judgment more than my own. But Rose, before you make that decision, you need to understand what they're actually inheriting if you give them what they think they want. I mortgaged the properties. Heavily. The house has a loan of $1,050,000 against it. It's worth $920,000. That's a $130,000 deficit. The Lake Tahoe villa, $880,000 in debt against a $780,000 value. Another $100,000 in the hole. If you give them those properties, they'll be inheriting $230,000 in debt, not $2 million in assets. The real money, $3.2 million from the business sale in our savings, is in a trust called Palmer Holdings. Only you can access it. It's safe. It's yours. It always was. The life insurance isn't $250,000. It's $400,000. That extra money is to help you start over. I built them a trap, Rose. A beautiful, perfect trap. If they take the inheritance they're so desperate for, they'll drown in debt. And maybe, just maybe, that'll be the rock bottom they need to finally change. But here's the thing, I couldn't force them to take it. They can refuse the inheritance, walk away clean. That's why you can't let them know about the debts until after they've committed to accepting the estate. You have to make them want it. Make them believe they're winning. I know I'm asking a lot. I know this seems cruel, but I watched my first wife gamble herself to death while I stood helpless on the sidelines. I won't watch Nathan do the same, and I won't watch Violet stay trapped in a marriage that's killing her soul. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do is let someone hit bottom. Call Sarah Mitchell. She'll explain the rest of the plan. Trust her. Trust yourself. And Rose, I love you. I've loved you from the moment you spilled coffee on my briefcase at that faculty mixer 25 years ago. You thought you were clumsy and forgettable. I thought you were the most genuine person I'd ever met. You're stronger than you know, smarter than you believe, braver than you feel. This isn't just about saving Nathan and Violet. It's about you discovering who you are when you're not defined by being my wife or their stepmother. You're going to be magnificent. All my love, always and forever, Douglas. The recording ended. I sat in the silence, Douglas's words echoing in my head. You're stronger than you know. Was I? Because right now I felt like I was drowning. The weight of it all, the deception, the manipulation, the elaborate plan Douglas had constructed, was crushing. But underneath the grief and confusion, something else was stirring. Something I hadn't felt in a long time. Anger. Not at Douglas, not even really at Nathan and Violet, despite everything. At myself. For 24 years I'd played a role. The supportive wife, the understanding stepmother, the woman who smiled and nodded and never made waves. I'd abandoned my teaching career because Douglas's work was more important. I'd sublimated my own dreams because his children needed stability. I'd made myself smaller and smaller until I almost disappeared. And now Douglas was gone, and I was being forced to choose. Stay small and powerless, or step into the role he'd left for me. I pulled out my phone and dialed the number on Sarah Mitchell's business card before I could talk myself out of it. She answered on the second ring. "Mrs. Palmer," she said, like she'd been expecting my call. "I've been waiting to hear from you." Sarah Mitchell's office was nothing like Thomas Reed's polished downtown suite. It occupied the second floor of a converted Victorian in Midtown, all exposed brick and original hardwood floors. The woman herself matched the space. Mid-40s, sharp eyes behind frameless glasses, sensible clothes that prioritized function over fashion. "Douglas said you'd find the box when you were ready," she said, gesturing me to a worn leather chair across from her desk. "How are you holding up?" "I don't know," I admitted. "I feel like I've been living in one reality and just discovered there's a completely different one underneath." "That's accurate." She pulled out a thick file. "Your husband was one of the most methodical people I've ever worked with. When he hired me 7 months ago, he had already gathered most of the evidence himself. He just needed legal guidance on how to structure everything properly. The will Thomas has is valid. Douglas executed it 6 months ago with Thomas as witness, but he created a second will 5 weeks before he died, with me as his attorney. The second will supersedes the first." "Why the elaborate deception? Why not just tell Nathan and Violet the truth?" Sarah leaned back in her chair. "Because Douglas understood something important. His children needed to reveal who they'd become. If he'd confronted them directly, they would have apologized, promised to change, manipulated him into giving them another chance. And he would have believed them because he loved them. So he let them think they were getting away with it. More than that, he gave them exactly enough rope to hang themselves. And now you have a choice to make, Mrs. Palmer. What kind of inheritance do Nathan and Violet actually deserve?" I thought about the recordings, Nathan's desperate manipulation, Violet's coerced compliance, the underlying sickness and abuse driving their actions. "I don't know," I said honestly. "Part of me wants to give them nothing. Let them face the consequences of their choices. But another part, they're not monsters, Sarah. They're broken people making terrible decisions. Which is exactly why Douglas left this choice to you instead of making it himself. She pulled out another document. Here's what I can tell you. If you give them the properties as they expect, they'll inherit $230,000 in debt. That debt will force them to either declare bankruptcy or find a way to pay it off. Either way, it's rock bottom. And if I don't give them anything? They walk away clean. No inheritance, but no debt either. Nathan can continue gambling until he either gets help or destroys himself completely. Violet stays trapped with Marcus, terrified to leave. Those are both terrible options. Yes, Sarah agreed. But there is a third way. We could structure the inheritance with conditions. Nathan gets his portion only after completing treatment and maintaining sobriety. Violet gets hers contingent on leaving Marcus and entering therapy. The money would be held in trust, administered by professionals, released in increments based on meeting specific milestones. I stared at her. Douglas planned for that possibility? Douglas planned for every possibility. He left me with instructions for multiple scenarios, depending on what you discovered and what you decided. He trusted you to make the right call. My phone buzzed. A text from Nathan. Mom, just checking in. Have you had time to think about the estate transfer? We're here to help with whatever you need. The presumption in those words, we're here to help, like they were doing me a favor by stealing my home. How long do I have to decide? I asked Sarah. The law requires a reasonable period for estate administration. I can probably buy you 3 weeks before they start pushing for immediate transfer. But Mrs. Palmer, every day you wait is a day Nathan digs himself deeper into debt with the casinos. A day Violet stays in danger with Marcus. She was right. She was, whatever I decided to do, I needed to move quickly. What do I do first? Sarah smiled, a sharp, strategic smile that reminded me of Douglas. First, you play the part they expect. Confused widow, overwhelmed by legal documents, ready to just sign everything over to make the problem go away. You keep them confident, comfortable, convinced they're winning. I don't know if I can do that. I'm not good at deception. Douglas thought you were capable of anything. Are you going to prove him wrong? The challenge in her words stung. But underneath the sting was something else. Possibility. Maybe Douglas was right. Maybe I was stronger than I knew. Tell me what to do, I said. 3 days later, I sat in Nathan and Jessica's dining room in San Francisco, playing my role to perfection. Their house was a monument to borrowed elegance, the kind of place that looked expensive until you noticed the small tells. The artwork was good, but not great. The furniture was high-end rental, not owned. The wine Nathan poured with such ceremony was impressive for a $30 bottle, but wouldn't fool a real collector. They were drowning in appearances, and the irony was almost painful. "This is lovely," I said, taking a small sip of the wine. "You've made such a beautiful home." Jessica beamed. "Thank you, Rosemary. We've worked hard to create the right atmosphere. Nathan's clients expect a certain standard. The right atmosphere, built on credit cards and loans and Nathan's gambling winnings when he was lucky. Violet and Marcus were there too. Violet looked thinner than I remembered, her smile brittle. Marcus was all charm, his hand possessively on Violet's shoulder, his grip just a shade too tight. I'd seen the bruises in the photographs. Now I was seeing how carefully Violet wore long sleeves despite the warm evening. How she flinched slightly when Marcus reached for her. "Rosemary," Nathan said, settling into his chair with practiced ease. "We wanted to have you over before we finalize all the legal matters. Make sure you're comfortable with everything." "That's thoughtful," I said, playing with my napkin. "I have to admit I'm still a bit overwhelmed by all the paperwork. Legal documents were always Douglas's domain." The relief on Nathan's face was almost comical. "That's completely understandable. Estate law is complicated. Why don't you just sign where Thomas indicates, and Violet and I will handle the details." "You're so good to me," I said softly. "Both of you. I don't know what I'd do without family." Guilt flickered across Violet's face. Nathan's expression remained smooth, but I saw his hand shake slightly as he poured himself more wine. Actually, I continued, I've been going through Douglas's office, and I keep finding documents I don't understand. Bank statements for accounts I've never heard of. Business papers for companies I didn't know he was involved with. Nathan went very still. What kind of documents? Oh, nothing important probably. Just confusing paperwork. Although I did find a key to a safety deposit box I'd never seen before. The color drained from Nathan's face. Across the table, Marcus leaned forward, suddenly interested. A safety deposit box? Marcus asked, his voice carefully casual. Do you know which bank? I haven't looked into it yet, I lied. Is it important? Probably not, Nathan said quickly. Dad had various accounts over the years. Most of them are closed now. I wouldn't worry about it. But I saw the look he exchanged with Violet. Pure panic, quickly suppressed. You're probably right, I agreed easily. I just feel like I should understand everything before we finalize the estate. Douglas was so careful about finances. I want to honor that. Of course, Jessica interjected smoothly. But you shouldn't burden yourself with all those details. Let Nathan and Violet handle the complicated stuff. You focus on healing. Focus on healing. Code for stop asking questions and sign the papers. I excused myself to the bathroom, needing a moment away from the performance. In the hallway, I paused outside Nathan's home office. The door was slightly ajar. I shouldn't. I knew I shouldn't, but I pushed it open anyway. The room was meticulously organized. Law books, framed degrees, an expensive desk. But on that desk, partially hidden under a file folder, I saw a stack of papers. Collection notices, all addressed to Nathan Palmer. Final notice. $15,000 due immediately. Your account is 90 days past due. Legal action will be pursued if payment is not received. And underneath those, a flyer for Gamblers Anonymous. The next meeting was circled. Tuesday, 7 p.m. My heart ached. He knew he had a problem. Some part of him was trying to get help, but he was too ashamed, too proud, too desperate to actually go. On the wall beside his desk hung a photograph I recognized. Nathan at 12 years old, standing beside his mother. Her smile was bright, her arm around his shoulders, but I could see it now. The slight tension in her posture, the shadows under her eyes. The same shadows I'd seen under Nathan's eyes tonight. He was so afraid of becoming her that he was fulfilling the prophecy. Rosemary? I spun around. Jessica stood in the doorway, her expression unreadable. I was just looking for the bathroom, I said quickly. Got turned around. It's that way. She pointed down the hall, but her eyes flicked to the desk, to the collection notices I'd been examining. For a moment we just looked at each other, and I saw something in her face, not anger, not suspicion, something closer to desperation. He's trying, she said quietly. He really is. He just needs a miracle, I supplied gently. Her laugh was bitter. Something like that. She led me back to the dining room, but something had shifted. Jessica knew. Maybe not all of it, but enough. She knew her husband was drowning, and she didn't know how to save him. None of us did, except maybe Douglas had known all along. Dinner continued with forced normalcy. We made small talk about Violet's consulting business, Marcus doing most of the talking while Violet stayed quiet. We discussed the weather, property values in Sacramento, Nathan's latest case. All of it surface, all of it performance. As we finished dessert, an elaborate chocolate creation that Jessica had clearly stressed over, my phone rang. Grace Thompson, my neighbor and oldest friend. I'm so sorry, I said, checking the screen. I should take this. I stepped out onto their deck, grateful for the cool evening air. Grace, is everything okay? Honey, I just had the strangest conversation. Grace's voice was troubled. A man came by your house looking for you. Said his name was Marcus Webb, that he was your son-in-law. My blood went cold. What did he want? He was asking about Douglas's estate, specifically about whether you'd inherited any life insurance. He was very persistent. Said he wanted to talk to you about investment opportunities. Marcus was already planning his next move, already scheming how to get his hands on whatever money he thought I had. What did you tell him? That you weren't home and I didn't know when you'd be back. But Rosemary, there was something off about him. The way he looked at your house like he was, I don't know, cataloging assets. Thank you for calling, Grace. I'll be home soon. I hung up and stood for a moment, looking out over San Francisco's glittering lights. Somewhere in this city, Nathan owed money to people who made Marcus look gentle. Somewhere in Los Angeles, Violet was planning her escape from an abusive marriage. And I was standing in the middle of it all, holding the keys to their futures in my trembling hands. You're stronger than you know, Douglas had said. I hoped he was right, because the game was just beginning and I was playing for stakes I barely understood. 2 days after the San Francisco dinner, Jessica called me. Her voice was barely a whisper. Rosemary, I need your help. Nathan's been at Golden Gate Casino for 36 hours straight. He won't answer my calls. I'm afraid he's... Her voice broke. Can you please try to talk to him? I'd been expecting this. Sarah had warned me that Nathan's gambling always intensified when he was stressed, and learning I might know about hidden assets would definitely count as stress. Text me the address, I said. I'm coming. The Golden Gate Casino was exactly as depressing as I'd imagined. Stale cigarette smoke and artificial lighting and the constant electronic melody of slot machines. I found Nathan at a poker table, surrounded by chips and empty glasses, his tie loosened, his eyes fever bright. He'd been winning. I could tell by the size of his stack, which meant he'd stay until he lost it all. That was how his mother had operated, according to Douglas. The winning just delayed the inevitable crash. I sat down in the empty chair beside him. Mom? He blinked at me, confused. What are you doing here? Jessica's worried about you. I'm fine, just on a hot streak. One more hand and I'll... Come home? His laugh was hollow. Yeah, sure, one more hand. The dealer looked at me with tired, knowing eyes. She'd seen this story 1,000 times. Nathan, I said quietly. I know. His hand stilled over his chips. Know what? About the gambling, about the debts, about the people you owe money to. For a moment I thought he might deny it, deflect, make excuses, do what he'd probably been doing his whole life. Instead, something in him seemed to collapse. Dad told you, he said dully. In a way, he left me recordings, evidence, everything. Nathan closed his eyes. So you know what we were planning, what I did to Violet. He opened his eyes and they were wet with tears. I'm just like her, aren't I? My mother. I can't stop. I've tried, Mom. God, I've tried. But every time I think I can quit, something happens and I'm right back here. I know about the Gamblers Anonymous meetings. I drove to one, sat in the parking lot for an hour, couldn't make myself go in. Too ashamed. I watched him for a moment. This man who'd tried to steal my home, who'd blackmailed his own sister, who'd forged documents and lied to lawyers. And all I could see was a 12-year-old boy sitting beside his dead mother, wondering if he'd inherited her demons. The inheritance you're expecting, I said carefully. Do you really think it will save you? It has to. I owe $180,000. If I don't pay it back, they'll... He stopped. It doesn't matter. The inheritance will cover it. I'll pay everyone off, go to rehab, start fresh. I promise, Mom. This time will be different. You promised that to your father. 6 times, he said. Nathan flinched. Yeah. Well, Dad's not here to disappoint anymore, is he? No, but I am. He looked at me. Really looked at me for the first time since I'd sat down. What does that mean? It means I'm not going to watch you gamble yourself to death like your mother did. It means I'm not going to enable your addiction by giving you money you'll just lose at tables like this one. I kept my voice gentle but firm. And it means that if you want your inheritance, you're going to have to earn it. I don't understand. You will. Soon. I stood up, placed my hand on his shoulder. Your father loved you, Nathan. More than you'll ever know. Everything he did, all of it, was to try to save you. The question is, are you going to let him? I left him sitting at that poker table, surrounded by his chips and his demons, and prayed that Douglas's plan would work. Because if it didn't, I'd just watched Nathan Palmer place his last bet. The call came at 2 a.m., Violet's number, but when I answered, all I heard was crying. "Violet? Honey, what's wrong?" "Rosemary, Her voice was choked with tears. "I need to tell you something. About Marcus. About everything. But if he finds out I called you..." The line went dead. I tried calling back. No answer. I texted, "Violet, are you safe? Should I call the police?" No response. I sat in my dark bedroom, Douglas's side of the bed still untouched, my phone clutched in my hand. Every instinct screamed at me to drive to Los Angeles, to bang on their door, to force my way in if necessary. But Sarah's voice echoed in my head. You have to let them choose. You can't save people who aren't ready to be saved. At 3:30 a.m., my doorbell rang. I grabbed Douglas's baseball bat from the closet. Ridiculous, but it made me feel safer, and crept down the stairs. Through the peephole, I could see Violet standing on my porch, a small suitcase beside her, her face streaked with tears. I yanked open the door. "Oh, sweetheart," I breathed. She collapsed into my arms, sobbing. I pulled her inside, locked the door behind us, and just held her while she cried. When the tears finally slowed, I made her tea and we sat in the kitchen, the same kitchen where she'd sat as a teenager doing homework at this table while Douglas and I made dinner. Back when the world was simpler and I still believed I knew who we all were. "He knows," she whispered. "Marcus knows about the inheritance. He's been tracking all the communications with Thomas Reed. He has access to all my emails, my phone, everything. Violet, that's abuse, I know. I've known for a long time, but I didn't know how to leave. The consulting business, the one I thought was legitimate, he's been using it to launder money. Gambling debts, loan sharks, people I don't even know. And my name is on everything. If I leave him, if I report him, I go to prison too. Sarah Mitchell can help you. There are ways to..." "I don't want help." She stood abruptly, pacing. "I just want the inheritance so I can pay back all the people Marcus stole from and disappear. Start over somewhere he'll never find me." This was the moment. The choice Douglas had left for me. I could tell her the truth, that the inheritance she was expecting was actually debt, that she'd be fleeing one disaster straight into another. Or I could let her believe the lie a little longer, give her false hope while I figured out how to actually help her. "Violet," I said carefully. "The inheritance, it's not what you think." She froze. "What do you mean?" So I told her about the safety deposit box, the recordings, Douglas's plan, about the mortgaged properties and the hidden trust fund and the second will that left everything to me. I told her everything. When I finished, she was crying again, but different tears this time. Not desperation. Something closer to relief. "He knew," she whispered. "Dad knew what Marcus was doing to me. What Nathan was forcing me to do. And he..." She looked up at me with wonder. "He protected me. Even from myself." He did. And now I'm going to finish what he started. I pulled out my phone and called Sarah Mitchell, not caring that it was 4 a.m. "Mrs. Palmer?" Sarah answered immediately, alert. "What's wrong?" "I need you to draw up paperwork for a separate trust, for Violet. $150,000, conditional on her filing for divorce, entering therapy, and paying back Marcus's victims. Can you do that?" "I can have it ready by this afternoon." "And Sarah, we need to do this quietly. Marcus can't know until Violet's safely away from him." "Understood." I hung up and looked at my stepdaughter, this woman I'd known since she was 16, whom I'd never quite figured out how to mother. "You're really doing this?" she asked. "After everything Nathan and I tried to do to you?" "I'm doing what Douglas would have wanted. What you deserve. Not what you plan to take, but what you actually need. I don't understand why you're being so kind." "Because," I said gently. You're not the villain here, Violet. You're another one of Marcus's victims. And I'm done watching people I love be victimized. She came around the table and hugged me. Really hugged me. Not the air kiss performance from Nathan's dinner. Thank you, she whispered. Thank you for not giving up on me. We spent the rest of the night planning her escape. By the time the sun rose, Violet had called a divorce attorney Sarah recommended, packed what few possessions Marcus didn't monitor, and transferred her important documents to a cloud account he couldn't access. She was ready to run. But first, we had to finish the game Douglas had started. Marcus showed up at my door 2 days later. I'd been expecting him. Violet was safely hidden at Grace's house, her phone turned off, her divorce papers filed that morning, but Marcus didn't know that yet. Rosemary? He stood on my porch, all false charm and underlying menace. We need to talk about Violet's inheritance, woman to woman, or should I say family to family. Violet isn't here. I know, she's been acting erratic lately. Stress, probably, which is why I think it's important we discuss her financial future. She's not always rational about these matters. The condescension in his tone made my skin crawl. This was how he'd controlled her, by convincing her she couldn't think for herself, couldn't make decisions, couldn't survive without him. What do you want, Marcus? He stepped closer, and I caught a whiff of expensive cologne and something darker underneath. Desperation, maybe. Fear. I know Douglas was wealthier than that will suggested. I know there's more money somewhere. And I know that if you're smart, you'll make sure Violet gets her fair share. For her protection, of course. Her protection from what? His smile was sharp. From making poor choices. From legal troubles related to the consulting business. From people who might want to hold her accountable for certain financial irregularities. He was threatening to frame her, to let her take the fall for his crimes. Get off my property! Marcus's mask slipped. Or what? You'll call the cops? Violet will never testify against me. She's too afraid, and without her testimony, you've got nothing. Wrong! The voice came from behind me. Helen Bradford stepped out from my kitchen, holding up her phone. I've been recording this whole conversation. Threatening behavior, attempted coercion, implied blackmail. That's plenty. Marcus's face went purple. You can't. This is entrapment. Actually, another voice said, and Sarah Mitchell appeared from the hallway. It's called evidence, and combined with the financial records we've already compiled showing your fraud, money laundering, and domestic abuse, it's enough to put you away for a very long time. For the first time, Marcus looked genuinely scared. Where's Violet? He demanded. Safe, I said firmly. Somewhere you'll never find her. The divorce papers were filed this morning. You'll be served tomorrow. And if you try to contact her, approach her, or threaten her in any way, we'll file for a restraining order and turn all our evidence over to the district attorney. She's my wife. She was your victim, I interrupted. But not anymore. Marcus stared at me with pure hatred. Then, with a string of curses, he stormed off my porch and peeled out of my driveway. We watched him go in silence. Well, Helen said mildly, that was unpleasant. I started laughing, slightly hysterical, completely relieved. Sarah and Helen joined in, the three of us standing in my doorway, laughing at the absurdity of it all. But underneath the laughter was something fiercer, something I'd never felt before. Power. 1 week later, we all gathered in Thomas Reed's conference room for the final estate transfer. Nathan sat across from me, looking haggard. Jessica beside him, her hand tight in his. Violet was there too, wearing sunglasses to hide the remnants of a black eye. Her last gift from Marcus before she'd fled. Thomas Reed looked deeply uncomfortable. Sarah Mitchell sat beside me, calm and professional. Before we begin, Sarah said, I need to disclose something. I represent Mrs. Palmer's legal interests regarding the estate of Douglas Palmer, and there are complications we need to address. Nathan's face went pale. What kind of complications? Sarah pulled out a thick folder. Let's start with the properties you're expecting to inherit. The Sacramento house and Lake Tahoe villa. She slid documents across the table: mortgage statements, loan agreements, property assessments. The house is currently valued at $920,000. However, it carries a mortgage of $1,050,000. That's a deficit of $130,000. Nathan grabbed the papers, his hands shaking. That's not possible. Dad owned the house free and clear. He did, until 6 months ago when he took out a substantial loan against it. The Lake Tahoe property is similar, $880,000 in debt against a $780,000 value. Violet gasped. Nathan looked like he might be sick. This is fraud, he said weakly. It's not, Thomas Reed said quietly. All eyes turned to him. I've reviewed the documentation. The mortgages were legal, properly filed, and Douglas was mentally competent when he executed them. I have medical certification to that effect. But why would he? Nathan stopped, understanding dawning. Oh God. He knew. He knew what we were planning, and he built you a trap, I said gently. A beautiful, perfect trap. Sarah continued. If you accept the inheritance as originally outlined, you'll be inheriting $230,000 in debt. You'll have 30 days to refinance or assume the loans. Given your current credit situations, that's unlikely to be possible. We'll lose everything, Jessica whispered. Yes, Sarah agreed. You will. The silence was deafening. Then Sarah pulled out another document. However, there is an alternative. Nathan looked up, desperate hope in his eyes. Douglas created a second will 5 weeks before his death. This will supersede the one you've been working with. It leaves the entirety of the estate to Mrs. Palmer, with one provision. She has complete discretion over what, if anything, you inherit. Nathan turned to me. Mom, I'm not finished, I said firmly. Your father loved you both, more than you deserved, honestly, and he spent his final months trying to figure out how to save you from yourselves. I pulled out an envelope. This is for you, Nathan. He opened it with trembling hands. Inside was a letter in Douglas's handwriting and a contract. Read the letter first, I said. Nathan's eyes filled with tears as he read. When he finished, he passed it to Jessica, his voice broken. He wanted to save me. Even after everything, he just wanted to save me. The contract, Sarah explained, offers you a trust fund of $200,000, but it comes with conditions. 90 days of inpatient treatment for gambling addiction, 1 year of verified sobriety, weekly therapy sessions, and regular financial oversight. And if I refuse, you walk away with nothing. No inheritance, but no debt either. Your choice. Nathan looked at Jessica, at the letter, at me. Then he started to cry, deep, wrenching sobs. I need help, he said. I've needed help for so long, but I was too ashamed to ask. Too afraid of becoming my mother. But I'm becoming her anyway, aren't I? Unless I stop. There's a facility in Monterey, I said softly. Your father arranged everything. They're expecting you whenever you're ready. I'm ready, Nathan whispered. God help me, I'm ready. I turned to Violet. Your situation is different. You weren't driven by addiction. You were driven by fear, by abuse. I slid another contract across the table. $150,000, enough to pay back Marcus's victims, hire a good lawyer, and start over. The conditions are simple. File for divorce, complete trauma therapy, and use the money to make things right. I've already filed, Violet said, this morning, and Rosemary, Her voice broke. I'm so sorry. For all of it. You didn't deserve what we tried to do to you. No, I agreed. I didn't. But you didn't deserve what Marcus did to you either. Your father saw that. He wanted you free. Violet took the contract with shaking hands. Thank you. Thank you for not giving up on us. Thomas Reed cleared his throat. Mrs. Palmer, I owe you an apology. I should have questioned that first will more carefully. Douglas deserved better representation. You were doing your job, Thomas. And in the end, you helped make things right. That night, alone in my house now, truly mine, I opened Douglas's final letter. The one marked, Read this last. My darling Rose, if you're reading this, you succeeded. You found the box, understood the plan, had the strength to see it through. I'm so proud of you. For 24 years, you told me you weren't smart enough, strong enough, brave enough. You made yourself small because you thought that's what I needed. But I always knew the truth. You were the strongest person I ever met. You just needed to discover it yourself. This wasn't just about saving Nathan and Violet. This was about you finding your own power. The woman who could navigate this inheritance, stand up to manipulators, make impossible choices. That woman was always inside you. You just needed a reason to let her out. I'm sorry I had to die for you to find her, but I'm not sorry for the gift I'm leaving you. Freedom, strength, self-knowledge. You don't need me anymore, Rose. You don't need anyone. But I hope you'll choose to let people in anyway, not because you're weak, but because you're strong enough to. Build the life you want. Help who you choose. Love again if you wish. You have decades ahead. Live them as the woman you've become, not the woman you thought you were. P.S. The cottage in Carmel? I bought it 2 years ago. The deed is in the foundation paperwork. Welcome home. All my love, always, Douglas. My garden in Carmel was coming along beautifully. Roses bloomed in careful rows, herbs flourished in terracotta pots, and the ocean stretched endless and blue beyond my fence. Grace was visiting for the weekend. We sat on my deck, drinking wine and watching the sunset. "Have you heard from Nathan?" she asked. "He called yesterday. 90 days sober, working as a paralegal, earning honest money. He and Jessica renewed their vows. And Violet? Enrolled in community college, studying social work. She wants to help other abuse survivors." I smiled. "Marcus is under investigation. The DA has enough evidence to prosecute." "You did good, honey." "Douglas did good. I just finished what he started." But that wasn't quite true. Douglas had given me the tools, but I'd chosen how to use them. I'd found my strength, my voice, my power. My phone buzzed. A text from Violet. "First day of internship at DV shelter. Wish me luck." I sent back, "You don't need luck. You've got this. Love you." Nathan had sent me a photo that morning, his 1-year sobriety chip when he earned it. He was smiling, really smiling for the first time in years. The Palmer Foundation for Family Financial Literacy was launching next month, helping people escape the cycles that had almost destroyed my stepchildren. I wasn't Douglas's widow anymore, wasn't Nathan and Violet's stepmother. I was just Rosemary Palmer. And finally, miraculously, that was enough.